Hello, this is Dr. Gwen Fisher in Psychology 440, Industrial Psychology, in Module 4, still, talking about the criterion problem. This is Module 4.3, in which I will explain criteria for criteria. The learning objective for Module 4.3 is that by the end of this module, you should be able to identify specific criteria for criteria. So first, to review, what are criteria? Once again, they are evaluative standards that can be used as yardsticks. Criteria are important for our ability to conceptualize, operationalize, and measure things or outcomes we're interested in, like job performance or other work outcomes. There are some examples once again listed here. Here is a list of 5 criteria for criteria. First, the criteria need to be relevant. In other words, there needs to be some overlap between conceptually what we would ideally like to measure, again, that thing called the conceptual criterion that we talked about in Module 4.2, and then the actual criterion, which is what we're actually measuring. If there's absolutely no overlap between the conceptual criterion and the actual criterion, then we'd say that what we're measuring really isn't relevant. It doesn't really matter. Secondly, we need for the criteria to be reliable. This goes back to what Dr. Gibbons explained in Module 2 when we talked about measurement. We need for accuracy and consistency in the way we measure the criteria that we're interested in. Without reliability, we have some measurement problems, to say the very least. Third, criteria should be sensitive. I don't mean that they get their feelings bent out of shape, but rather that by sensitivity, criteria are able to detect differences between employees. Let's say, for example, that we're going to use measures of job performance to determine who should be promoted. If the criteria are not sensitive, then we're not going to be able to differentiate between employees and figure out who is deserving of the promotion and who is not. That's just one example. The fourth item on the list is practicality. This is perhaps the most obvious, simply that the measures that we use need to be useful. We need to be able to assess them. We can identify all of the actual criteria we want, but if we can't obtain them or measure them in organizations, it's really moot. Part of being practical, is that the criteria are accepted by most supervisors and employees. In other words, having a long job performance measure or performance appraisal system, if people are going to hate it, not want to fill it out because it's too long to be practical, well, then that doesn't work so well either. And importantly, last but not least, the criteria should include fairness. In other words, what is being measured needs to be perceived as either just or fair by both workers and supervisors. If you've taken Psychology 340 or studied organizational psychology, you may be familiar with the concepts of procedural justice or distributive justice. In case you don't know these terms, procedural justice refers to the extent to which people perceive fairness about the process of making decisions. So in other words, if a company is looking to see who should get what amount of raise or what % raise next year, regardless of what percentage people are given, that there's a perception that the process for making that decision is fair. Distributive justice, on the other hand, refers to fairness in terms of the outcomes. So regardless of what process was used for making the decision about raises, were you happy with the outcome, and did you feel that the outcome ended up being fair? So the next topic that we'll be talking about to put this all together is called the criterion problem. And following this module, there will be a brief question for you. Thank you.